Hola Comadres, this is your host Marcy of Comadreando podcast. I'm just dropping in to let you know that we are recording in New York City and there were some extraneous sounds we could not edit out. Also, Drogon, our future service dog, was walking around and going nuts during the first half of the interview. I was able to crate him after. It does not remove from the content of the episode. This will be a good one. And without further ado, hello, Comadre.
Hey, Comadre.
Hola, Comadres. Welcome to another episode of Comadreando podcast. I'm your host, Marcy, and today we have an amazing guest. Her name is Sivan, and I will let her introduce herself.
Hi.
Who are you?
Hi, thank you. My name is Sivan Hong. I am a neurodivergent author and illustrator of a children's book series called the Super Fun Day Books, which is a picture book series specifically designed for neurodiverse kids who are like preschool all the way up to about second or third grade.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So I usually like to give the audience a background of how I connected with my guests. So Sivan and I started following each other. I believe another account posted the Super Fun Day books, and I started looking into it. And when I started reading your bio, I was like, oh my God, she's neurodivergent and she has children on the spectrum. Amazing. Like, I need to get her on my show. So I decided to reach out, and then we connected, and the rest is history. So
yeah,
we're
perfect.
Go ahead. Sorry. Okay. So today's topic is neurodiverse parenthood, not creating it. So the reason why the topic came up is as parents of neurodiverse children, we often wonder what their futures can be like, rather. And it is nice to have someone share their journey to inspire and teach us. So we're going to get some little details out of the way, and then, we're going to let the conversation flow from there. So what is your child's diagnosis? And I know you have two children, so do both of them have a diagnosis?
They both do. I have one who has been diagnosed with autism and ADHD, and the other one has been diagnosed with ADHD and dysgraphia. So, yep, we're a full family when it comes to brain differences.
Amazing. So, the dysgraphia, can you explain that to the parents? Because some people might not know what it is.
Of course. So, when you learn to write and you see a letter in your mind, a typical brain will look at that and be able to copy what that letter looks like the way they see it on a piece of paper. Somebody with dysgraphia, it's almost like what translates in their brain is the mirror image of the letter. And so oftentimes you will see that, unlike dyslexia, where the letters themselves can be switched, in dysgraphia, the letters look like they've been flipped.
Yeah.
So a B normally would face the right, but a dysgraphic child will have it face the left. And that can obviously lead to a lot of frustrations, because when they then look at the paper, they see that there's a difference. But that connection between copying that letter can be a challenge. So writing becomes a lot more time consuming.
Yeah, I haven't really spoken too much about those type of differences in learning for our kids, but it's something that's really pervasive. And the thing is, as a special education teacher, you don't really get trained on how to work with children that have dysgraphia or dyscalculia, or that they are dyslexic. So a lot of the solutions, the teachers have to kind of go off on their own and figure it out, because, like, as part of regular teacher training, we weren't really, like, we know what it is, but we weren't taught on how to work with children in our classrooms that present those deficiencies, not deficiencies, but like difficulties in learning.
Right. And look, like they are more common than most people realize. And with them, while it makes something, in dysgraphia's case, like writing a challenge, it comes with incredible spatial skills. And I like to kind of bucket dyslexia, dysgraphia in a similar kind of bucket in terms of learning differences in the way your brain is structured. And people with dyslexia have unbelievable abilities for spatial recognition. There was actually a study done at Harvard last year where they looked at a bunch of astrophysicists, and they took a group that had dyslexia or dysgraphia or one of those types of learning differences, and then they took another group that had typical kind of brains, for lack of a better word. And they showed them images of black holes and said, identify where the black holes are. And these were PhDs at Harvard, right, with this skill set. And the ones with the dyslexia, the dysgraphia, were able to do it significantly more than the ones with the typical brains, because that is a strength that their brain has, right? And so while it may mean that reading a book in a traditional style or writing in a traditional way is a challenge, it doesn't mean that these brains don't bring incredible gifts. And one of the cool things that my son's third grade teacher does is she lets him use kind of the function on Google Docs that lets him talk through his stories, right? And
exactly.
So then he can focus on the words he wants to use instead of all the effort it takes to write it down on a piece of paper.
Because at the end of the day, we're not grading penmanship. I don't care what your letters look like. I just want to know that you can tell a story and that you're able to communicate those things and put them down on paper and like formulate this idea and get it down, you know, and really present it in a way that is engaging for the audience. So that was like one of my go-to solutions for the kids that I had learning difficulties with respect to dyslexia and I think one of my kids had dysgraphia. The problem, I want to just like kind of give a sidebar. The problem with the evaluation for dyslexia and dysgraphia and dyscalculia is the evaluation for that is it costs so much money that the Department of Education does not automatically provide that for your child, right? We as special education teachers look and we know the signs, right? So then we would go and find solutions for that. But to have a full evaluation for that, I would actually have to research how you would do that in New York State. But for sure, there's really nothing that is provided by the Department of Education to assist those children. But yeah, definitely the voice to text. That was like a game changer. That and then the reader on the iPad, because my school had 1-to-1 iPads in the building. So the reader on the iPad for the kids so that they can read it. And then the good thing about it, especially when you put it with the dyslexic setting, it'll highlight every word for them so that they know exactly what that word looks like and what it says. So it's really interesting. And I love like the advances in assistive technology that we've had in the past, I want to say 10 years in general. So
it makes such a big difference. Yes.
Yeah. It helps everybody learn. Like, and then there's people that are like, oh, well, you're not going to have, what is it? You're not going to have accommodations everywhere you go, but like, why not?
Well, and look, those are the same people who say that people who are blind and read with Braille are not really reading, or that you shouldn't put a ramp in front of a school for somebody in a wheelchair. Like, that's ridiculous, right? If you think back in history, all the incredible achievements that neurodivergent brains have done without these accommodations. I can only imagine what the future will hold when we do provide these kind of accommodations. Like, who cares, right? Like, in my mind, for reading, I don't care how the word gets into the brain, right? It can go in through your fingers, it can go in through your ears, it could go in through your eyes. As long as it gets into your mind and then you process it and do something with it, that's the power of the word, right? It's not the actual kind of getting it from point A to point B.
I love that. So yeah, like I love using assistive technology and helping my students learn in whatever way they can. Like I and then even like, so the Department of, like, in general, the education in the United States, they're so heavy on testing. And I honestly have created ways to assess my students that don't necessarily have to be pen and paper. Like, we're going to do a project and you're going to show me that you learned what I taught you in a different way. And that's okay. And that's still valid. You know, like, it doesn't need to be traditional. Like the systems of education that have been in place since the 1800s are no longer serving our children. So why not, revolutionize it and change it?
I don't think they serve any of them, right?
Yeah,
neurodivergent, neurotypical, sitting there and taking a 3-hour standardized test doesn't help anybody.
It just shows that you're good at regurgitating information. That's all it shows. It doesn't show that you're actually learning what you're learning. It's really just like remembering facts and putting them back out. So going back to your wonderful, intelligent children, when did you notice that they were different?
For my firstborn son, I think I noticed when he was around 1.5. And I think if I had had a son before him or a child before him, I probably would have noticed at 3 months, because he engaged with the world in a different way. He struggled interacting with other children. He played with toys in a very non-traditional way. And I could just tell that there was something different. And it took, I think, 6 different therapists to finally get a diagnosis for him that I knew existed, needed to be there. But he didn't engage the way I saw other kids engaging. And it wasn't that what he was doing was bad. It was different. And I knew that given that he was different, we needed to give him the accommodations in order to be able to be successful in the world as it exists today.
That's awesome. So what were the things in play that you noticed that he was doing?
So he had next to no pragmatic speech. I think for the first 2 years, he never asked a question.
Okay.
And he had a lot of very high splinter skills. So not every kid on the spectrum has that, and I think it's about 5% of them do. And I don't want to make it seem like that's the norm, but he was the kind of kid who could take 100-piece jigsaw puzzle, flip it upside down, start with the middle piece, and do it. Or he would say, oh, your birthday is on November 9th. Well, in 2075, your birthday's on a Tuesday, and he'd be right. Right? So he would have these skills, like, that are not very useful, right? Like, it's just a cool parlor trick. But then he couldn't engage and make friends because he didn't have those skills, right? Like, his brain was so developed in one side that it hadn't developed in the other side. And we'd go to a playground and he would say that he was scared to go because he didn't want to interact with other kids, right? Which is heartbreaking. And so while those tricks that he can do, these great splinter skills that he had, were really interesting and fascinating to see, we really wanted to work on his pragmatic skills, his language skills, so that he knew how to engage with other children, because he wanted to engage with other children. His brain just hadn't developed that skill yet.
Wow, that's so
and then
interesting.
with my second one, it was pretty obvious that he had the very classic ADHD diagnosis where he just couldn't sit still. Like, it was as if the floor was lava everywhere all the time, right? And while the stories he comes up with are incredible and he's so creative and all this other stuff, it became frustrating for him to sit in school without the right kinds of accommodations.
Yeah.
And you want a kid to not feel badly about themselves. You want them to be successful in whatever environment they're in. So we needed those accommodations to be able to help him kind of be his best.
I just want to say that, like, traditional, like, teaching, sitting in the classroom for 7 hours a day, that doesn't work for every kid, you know? Like,
no.
Even, like, when I don't have kids, like, when I have kids that are not diagnosed with ADHD and I see the wiggles, I just build into the whole, like, I don't want to single them out, but I just build into the classroom, like, these sensory breaks that we all just, like, dance around and, like, whatever makes your body feel good, we're going to do that for at least 5 minutes to help you concentrate. Because, like, it's proven, even for neurotypical people, doing physical activity before engaging in an academic activity actually helps your brain achieve better. And, like, it helps with the creativity in your brain. So it's like, you know, these little tricks, you know, the teachers from back in the day, like my mother, or like some of the teachers I had in elementary school, they used to, like, yell at the kids for, like, standing up or moving around. But we've been sitting for 7 hours. Like, how do you expect somebody to pay attention? Like, it's, for me as a neurotypical, it's hard for me to, like, sit through a 2-hour meeting without moving around or, like, going to the bathroom at least once.
Look, I think every kid should have flexible seating, right? And look, we see this in the workforce today where you have people with their standing desks and, you know, different seating and things like that. Like, of course, everybody kind of learns in a different way and needs different sensory inputs. Neurotypical or neurodivergent, it doesn't matter. Like, we all need that flexibility.
So when you noticed, you took them to get evaluated at the pediatrician, or how did that work for you guys?
I first went to the pediatrician and I said, look, I'm seeing these things, you know, can you recommend a psychologist or somebody to do an evaluation? And literally I went to 6 different people, and the first 5 tried to tell me, no, he's just gifted. And I'm like, while that sounds like a thing every parent wants to hear, or how lovely, no, that's not true. I knew that wasn't right. And so finally I found somebody, and it took hours, weeks of testing and a huge evaluation. And it was a big expense. And my insurance company fortunately covered part of it, but they don't cover all of it. But I needed that diagnosis because then I was able to get reimbursement for speech and OT and PT and all the other kind of supports that he needed when he was young. And the younger you get it for them, the more malleable their brain is, the more effective these things can be. And look, I'm not saying you want to try to turn them into somebody who's neurotypical. Like, that can't be done, right? Like, his brain is what his brain is. But I wanted to give him the tools in order to work within society. And so he needed to get all of these supports early on. And I think also giving him that diagnosis helped explain his difference. And every parent does it differently. But as soon as my kids got diagnosed, I was very open with them about what they had. When my oldest son knew, we didn't use the word autism right away because he was like 2 when he got the diagnosis. What's he going to understand about that? But we used to tell him he had a special brain, right? And that his special brain made some things hard and some things easy. And we used to talk about his special brain. And then, you know, by the time he was in kindergarten, he knew about his autism, and we would share with him people in history who we think were autistic and all the great things they did so that he could feel proud about his difference. And for us, it's always believe that you have to focus on all the positive things that your child can do. Because if you focus on all the positive things that your child can do, your child will start seeing them and the rest of the world will start seeing them, right? And if we focus on everything that they can't do, then that's what your child is going to see and that's what the world is going to see. And I don't mean it to be Pollyanna-ish. There are moments where it's really hard. But as a parent, it is my job to keep reminding him about how wonderful he is and all the great things that he brings. And that I know he's going to do great things in this world, whatever they happen to be. And so that's how we've done it here. Same thing with ADHD. And my second son, when I told him and we talked about it, and the analogy I use is the one about having a race car brain, that your brain is wired to go super, super fast and you're going to win the race. But if you don't learn how to slow down and take the curves, you're going to jump the curves. So in order to win the race, you have to learn how to slow down. And he looked at me and he's like, Mommy, I'm not going to tell anybody I have ADHD. And I'm like, okay, like that's your decision. And he's like, I don't want to brag to people. And I'm like, good, we're good. We've done our work. Let's go have dessert now, right? That. Like, there are days where they're like, I wish I didn't have whatever I have. I wish I was like everybody else. But every kid out there feels that, right? I wish I was taller. Yeah. I wish I was skinnier. I wish I had blonde hair. Whatever it is that they wish at that moment, to be exactly like everybody else. Every kid has that.
Yeah. And it like the world would be so freaking boring if everybody was exactly the same. Exactly. I'm sorry. No, like I love our kids and I love like their differences. Like my son, his autism is like so different. Like his brain just works in such an amazing way. I'm gonna tell you like an anecdote. So he had gotten early intervention and they put him in a socialization program. So he used to go for like 2 hours a day. This little teeny weeny 2-year-old would get on the bus with a car seat and go to this socialization program. And I went to visit one time and they like told me, they're like, you know what? We've had this thing up here for months. Nobody has ever found out what it was. And Aiden looks up at it and he's like, oh, look, a cowbell. And that's exactly what it was. But nobody had noticed that it was there and nobody thought to look. And he looked at it and knew that it was a cowbell. How did he know? I still don't know. But it's just the way their brains work is just like amazing. Like, amazing. I tell everybody, I brag about my other student. I had a little boy. His name was, let's just call him Johnny. Johnny used to tell me how to take the train. Like he knew the subway map here in New York City so well that I can tell him, okay, so I need to get to my house and I'm gonna get on the train at 42nd Street. What train should I take? And he would tell me exactly stop by stop, like what like to expect on the train. Which, yes, it seems like a parlor trick, but their brains are just like amazing. And then I feel like I don't want their brains to change. I want them to continue being them, but for the world to be more accepting of their differences and not judge them for not functioning in the way that a neurotypical is supposed to function.
That's right.
So you told me they got early intervention. How was that? Like it was, what state are you in, by the way? Sorry.
I live in Connecticut.
Okay.
And so Connecticut's pretty good. But I ended up paying for my son's early intervention out of pocket. I didn't go through birth to 3, mostly because I didn't even realize it existed. And which is amazing. Like, I didn't know. Right. And I was able to get some of it covered through the insurance company, which was really helpful. And then, he went to a special preschool that had, a program where it had special needs kids with typical kids, and they did a lot for him. And then our public school system here where I live is phenomenal, and they provide so many supports. And it's not like that everywhere, which is really unfortunate, because if you get them young and you do the interventions early, then their quality of life, their trajectory of life looks very different. And places that don't invest now will end up having to invest later a lot more money, right? So even if you're just thinking about it from a money perspective, it makes much more sense to really, particularly at the elementary school, preschool age, invest in these kids, because then their outcomes are just noticeably better.
Yeah. So one thing about like, let's say reading intervention, right? The faster you catch that slip, like let's say it's just a crack in a mirror, right? You know how the mirror, you get like a little crack in your mirror, a ding or whatever. If you catch it when it's that small, you can put it back together, or you can get it as close to being like regular as possible. The more time that passes, that crack gets bigger, and it gets to a point that the whole mirror shatters. So this is how I explain to parents, get the help now, because they can always be eventually, like, let's say it's not autism and it's just like a reading disability or whatever it is. You can get them as close to their neurotypical peers as possible if you start as early as possible. The longer you wait, the harder it's going to be for your child to be able to have some kind of semblance of quote unquote normality, you know? So it's important. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes, I agree with that. There was one of my guests. She actually got diagnosed when she was 38 years old. She's 40 now. She went through her whole life thinking something was wrong with her, and people were like judging her and telling her she was a jerk, or and she was weird. And she spent her whole life dealing with that, and she didn't know why she was the way she was. And then when she got the diagnosis, she finally was like, it was like you turned on a light bulb in a dark room. So,
Yes.
I'm sure that because she went through a lot of mental health things also, I'm sure that had she known, it wouldn't have been as severe as it was.
Yes. Even though back then they didn't have a lot of help, at least there's an explanation. At least there's it's not, that I'm the only one in the whole world who's experiencing this moment.
Mm-hmm. And I feel like knowing who you are, it helps so much to build community and have support from other people. Because the thing is, like,
yes.
As soon as you know yourself better, you're better able to function in society in general.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
So how was your family support, or like from friends, like once you got the diagnosis for your boys?
It was somewhat mixed. My friends and everybody was very supportive. I think it took a little bit for my family to accept it. And then for me, I think it was more because they just didn't understand, right? In their minds, they thought of like Rain Man, right? Like, he's not like Rain Man, right? Like they have this like image that the media portrays, and so they're like, oh, if it's not that, then no, you can't have it, right? And so it was on me to educate them, to be like, no, this is what it is. And when you're with him, look, these are the things. And then they got it over time. And so now I think it feels very supportive. But it was hard at first because as parents, you're trying to digest it all and you need that support from your family, but they're trying to digest it too. And they're kind of one level removed. So I think that makes it even harder.
Yeah. It's and I feel like it doesn't matter what your cultural background is or where your family's from. Like, families have such a hard time, and it doesn't matter. And this is true for like people of color or people that are not people of color. It's like all across the board, especially if you have never dealt with anybody that has been on the spectrum. It's like so hard for them to understand and then like wrap their head around. Because I feel like you said, the media has such a big influence on how people think of people with special needs or like diverse needs, you know?
That's one of the reasons why, well, that's one of the reasons why I wrote my books, because I wanted to put it out there in a picture book form so that these kids could look at themselves in a book and be like, oh, there's someone else who's like me, right? That the books could be a mirror of themselves. And I have 4 books out, and then I have a collection of them, but I have 4 books out, and I specifically made 2 of the protagonists in the books girls of color, because the media never portrays neurodivergent people as female, or especially not a female of color. And that's missing. And we need that, because what happens when we have this idea that it's the white smart boy, that's what neurodivergent looks like, those girls don't get a diagnosis, because when people look at them, they don't see the white smart boy. They see the girl of color who's having a hard time in the classroom, and then she doesn't get those services, and that's not okay. And so the more we can put it out that this looks like this in all different colors, in all different genders, in many different ways, the more kind of those kids will feel accepted and normal, and the more the world will start diagnosing them at a younger age when they need to be diagnosed. It can't just be kind of the smart guy who's, you know, on some comedy show.
Smart guy. Yeah.
Right. Like, that's not it. That's not the face of this. It can't be the face of it.
Yeah. So one of the I'm going to connect you with one of the people that I interviewed. She's a woman on the spectrum, and her Instagram is phenomenally autistic. She's an artist and she's an author, and she's amazing. Like,
oh, good.
I love her so much. Yes. And she wrote books about girls of color that are neurodivergent. And like all her beautiful illustrations are like these beautiful brown girls with like curly hair, so that like other girls feel represented. Because the thing is, not only are girls diagnosed at a later time, but I feel like masking has a little bit to do with it, because girls, the way that we're socialized, we're like creatures that are like
way better at masking. Way better at masking.
We're just trying to like survive, right? And like be part of this group, right? So we're gonna do whatever it takes, even if it's uncomfortable, to fit in, right? Because we don't want to be the odd man out. So
that's right.
A lot of the time, the girls, besides the fact that girls usually, I don't know if it's because that they don't display because of the masking, they don't display as many symptoms of autism early on. You know, it's so important for representation is so important. I feel like in everything it's important, but especially in the neurodiverse community, we need to show different faces of autism and ADHD. It's not just, like you said, the little white boy that is like, you know, bouncing off the walls or whatever, is quirky and very smart. And, you know, there's different faces of autism, you know, and not only that, but then like, I don't know if you've, I'm sure you've like with your son's classes, you've seen kids, but there's like also children that are nonverbal. But nonverbal doesn't mean that they are not understanding what's going on either. Like, they have receptive language. They're just as smart as everybody else. It's just they're not able to use expressive language.
Yeah, there were two nonverbal guys who graduated from UC Berkeley this past spring. And with the help of assistive technology, we're able to graduate. One of them's going on to get a PhD, I think, right? Like, that has nothing to do with your intellect at all.
Mm-hmm.
It has everything to do with your ability to connect your brain to the muscles in your mouth and to speak.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't mean, right? And people just assume that if you can't talk, that you're not smart.
Mm-hmm.
And they're missing this whole population of people, right? And so that's going back to our original conversation. That's where the assistive technology becomes so powerful and so life-changing for some of these folks. Mm-hmm.
I saw the documentary, The Reason Why I Jumped, and that documentary just like completely flipped my world upside down, because the person that wrote it is actually a person who's nonverbal on the spectrum from Japan, and the way that he communicated, the way that they see their world, and then the people that they had as part of the documentary, that they were using like assistive technology, but it wasn't like an iPad. They were tapping letters to spell, and they were so quick with it. Like, it was amazing the way that they were able to like get like complex thoughts across by using like a stick to tap the letters, and then people were like interpreting or watching what they were doing to like spell the words out for them, which was like, my brain was just like amazing. But yeah, definitely, as through the show, I want to keep breaking stigmas and like pushing the envelope and showing that our neurodiverse children are as special as neurotypical children, and like even more so than, like they're
I could
so
not
capable.
agree more. Yep.
They're so capable of
I could not agree more.
doing amazing. So tell me about your kids. I know, how old are they more or less? And then like, what kinds of things are they into? What makes them sparkle? Like, tell me about them.
So I have an 11-year-old and a 9-year-old, and they're both really into basketball, which I don't get because I'm not into basketball at all, but they're really, really into basketball. And it's funny because when my eldest son was diagnosed, the therapist was like, he's never going to be on a sports team, so don't even go there. That will be too hard for him. And I'm like, and now I see him and I'm like, whoa, 3-pointer, right? Like, there you go. Like, people automatically assume when they hear that a kid's autistic that they're going to do, I don't know what, but not play basketball all day long. But
Yeah.
That's what my son does. They're both really into that. And he also my oldest loves politics, and while we're recording this, election day was yesterday, and he was glued to the TV watching all of the results. And he just a really interesting, cool mind, and I can't wait to see where he goes with all of it. And my younger one is just incredibly creative and writes stories and walks around making songs, and just there's always something there with him. And like every child, right? Like, they are just magic, and being around them is magic. And, if you ask me if I could give them a pill to get rid of their neurodiversity, I would say absolutely not. Because some of the coolest parts about them, come from that side of who they are. It makes getting ready in the morning hard because you have 3 people in the house, me included, with ADHD, and trying to be like, okay, here's all the stuff we gotta do. But it's fun.
I love that. So, okay, let's switch gears a little bit. So, when did you find out that you had ADHD?
After both my kids were diagnosed with it. So I was 47 when I found out. And I knew, right? Like, my husband, I was like, honey, the kids say I need to go get a neuropsych because they've both been, diagnosed. And he's like, okay, we know what it's going to be. But like, I'm like,
sure.
Yep. But it was a great experience to do it because it confirmed what I knew. But there's something that, like, the value and the formality of it was really helpful I was surprised because I went through this kind of mourning process about it that I didn't expect because I knew what was coming.
Mm-hmm.
But like, I was mad about what my schooling was like. I was like, I went back and I'm like, I can't believe like what I went through as a kid in school, being undiagnosed, and how much harder everything was, and it didn't have to be.
Yeah.
And then I was like, okay, but that was a long time ago, and they certainly weren't doing the accommodations that they're doing now.
Mm-hmm.
But it's really useful because when my kids are like, well, this is too hard, I have ADHD or I have this, I'm like, no, sorry, that is not your excuse.
Yeah.
Right? Like, our brains are different, but we still have to be accountable for our homework and everything else we have to do. But it's nice. It gives me a connection with them.
So besides having the connection with them, how did like it affect you in your parenting? Do you make more of an effort to structure your day so that the ADHD
Well, I do that anyway.
Okay.
I do that anyway because that's the only way I survive. Like, I was doing that before my diagnosis. Like, my inbox has to be empty before I go to bed because otherwise I will forget everything and nothing gets done. Right? And my phone has like 8 different alarms set, so I remember to go pick up the kids and remember go do this and do that, and like otherwise not. Like, I have structured my life in such a way before I knew my diagnosis so that I can be effective. Twins. Now it turns out all those things that I do are really great for somebody with ADHD, and I sit here as I talk to you with a fidget toy because that is how I've always needed to kind of communicate. When I was younger, before fidget toys, I would take like the metal hangers from dry cleaning and I would sit there and play with them. Like, I always needed a fidget toy. Like, this is like, this was me. I created all of this stuff in order to be able to function. And as soon as somebody showed me an audiobook, I was hooked because I could never get through a book. I lived with like Cliff Notes. And now I'm like a voracious reader because I can listen to everything and that's the way I can process.
That's so interesting. Yeah, I love that. Did you feel like a sense of relief when you got the diagnosis?
Yeah.
You're like, this
because
is
it
why.
Explained everything. I'm like, this is why I can't spell at all. This is why I failed spelling literally an F in second grade. Who gives a second grader an F? I don't know, but that's the way it was in the 70s.
Bad teacher.
But it explained a lot. But then I got mad too, like I said, because, you know, why was it that hard? Like, why did I have to struggle that much harder? And look, I was successful in school. I have multiple graduate degrees, and I was a professor at NYU for a while. Like, I was very successful at school, but I worked harder than I needed to have done, right? And like, that's the part that I'm like, what a waste. Like, I could have been doing so many other things instead of like pulling my hair out, writing my dissertation the way I did, because it was too, I didn't realize what my brain was doing at the time.
That's so powerful. Wow. Oh my gosh. So I am obsessed with your books because I write all these social stories for my students when I know that they're having a hard time, and then like having these books already written is like a game changer completely. So tell me a little bit more about the work you've been doing to raise awareness about neurodiversity and educating other people via you becoming an author and writing these books.
So I created these social stories for my kids. And so they're real. And then I realized that that's really kind of nice, but that was only helping my kids. Like, that's not really what it's about. And I said in my craziness, because I'm not a trained author. I'm not a trained illustrator. I'm like, I'll just write these books and I'll illustrate them and let's see what happens. And I don't know. It was like one of these random thoughts. I had never in my wildest dreams thought I was going to be an author. And so I did, because I already had the stories, and they're real, right? They're fiction because they're fiction, but they're real stories and they really happened. And I actually use the teachers' names that were the real teachers in my kids' lives at that time, as my way of saying thank you to them for all the great things that they've done for my children. So all of the teachers' names in the books are real. And I did not know what I was doing, because again, like, this was not something I had set out to do, and I wasn't very thoughtful about it. And I released my first book in February, but it was a book about Halloween. You know,
Okay.
who releases a book about Halloween in February? I had no idea what I was doing. But strangely enough, it took, right?
Yeah.
There was a need for picture books with kids who wear headphones. There's a need for picture books that talk about structure and talk about some of these challenges that a neurodiverse child is going to face and show them succeed. And so I was like, if I can release a Halloween book in the middle of winter and it be successful, then I'm onto something. And so I've done 4. 3 of them have been number 1 for children's books with disabilities on Amazon, and the other one was number 1 for books about social and emotional and self-esteem on Amazon.
I love that.
I'm filling a gap, and I created, with the help of a school psychologist, teacher guides that are on my website that are free for anybody to go in and use them in their classrooms, and they are student tested. Because for me, I did not go into becoming a children's book author to make a lot of money. Like, if that was the case, I'm in the wrong line of work. But I went in to try to share these resources with as many parents as possible.
Yeah.
And it's working, because I get emails from parents saying things like, my kid looked at the book and they were like, oh, that's just like me. Right? And I'm like, yes, that's what I want these kids to feel like. Their experience is like so many other kids' experiences. And books are such a powerful way to do that.
Yeah, I completely love it. I actually have one of the moms I had on the show, her son, shout out to her name is Jaddy. Her son's name is Matthew, and Matthew walks around with headphones all the time, and I'm like dying to gift him one of the books so that he can be like, hey, look, it's me. He
if you give me his name and address, I will send him a book.
Oh, yay. That makes me so happy. But yeah, these books are so, and then okay, so we have people that are going to watch the YouTube video, right? But then there's people that are going to listen, which is my contribution to multiple modalities, right? I know some people learn better by listening, and I know some people learn better by watching. So this is how I'm putting my grain of sand to neurodiverse people that are listening to the show. So the people that are not watching the video, her books have multicultural children, and they're showing different types of neurodiversities in each book. So, if you can pick up a copy, I'm going to put the links in my Amazon storefront. And also, I'm going to put it in the show notes so you guys can pick up a copy for yourself. And then I always ask all the moms of our beautiful children, what does self-care look like for you? Because I know it's a lot. Being a mom, period, is a lot, but being the mother of a child with special needs is that much more. So how do you pour back into yourself and take care of you?
My favorite thing to do is to go on a walk with my husband and our dog, because I feel like it just allows me to get away from everything, and with a dog around, it relaxes you. And to me, making sure I can get one of those in every day with the fresh air is the best way to kind of recharge.
Mm-hmm.
I just think it doesn't even have to be that much time. It's this idea that you give yourself that it's okay to take some time to do something for just you, mm-hmm. right? That so many of us feel guilty about doing that. And if you can let go of that guilt, even for 5 minutes, and say, I'm going to sit on this couch and I'm going to read, I'll scroll Instagram for 5 minutes just for me. That in and of itself is what's powerful, not the activity. Although I do love the fresh air and the dog and my husband, but it's the fact that I can kind of allow myself the time to do it and know that that's okay. I'm not failing as a mother when I give back to myself.
Yes. I feel like it just reinforces how awesome we are as moms when we pour back into ourselves and take care of us. There's no negative consequence. 100%. Yeah, there's no negative consequence for like taking 5 or 6 minutes for yourself to like make sure that you're okay to be the best mom that you can be, So with That's right. Comadres, I want to end the episode how I always end it, which is... Oh, wait. I had one more question. So what is your ultimate goal with all the projects that you're currently working on surrounding autism? I know that you want to help teachers and children, but like, what is your ultimate goal more or less? Because I know it's like kind of like you wrote these books and you published them, but you didn't have like a goal necessarily in mind. But what do you foresee for yourself like within the next year or two?
For me, it's all about normalizing neurodiversity, for making people not feel like it's something wrong with you, but that it's a difference. And if I can do that with children, all the more powerful. It's important for teachers to read books like this in their class, because it's not just about the neurodivergent kid who's wearing the headphones. It's actually maybe even more important for the typical kid to look at that child in the book with the headphones and then look at his peer and be like, oh, there's nothing weird about him wearing headphones. That's just fine because I saw it in a book, right? And so for me, my goal is to leverage that power that books bring so that these kids can feel really good about themselves in school and that the peers can view them as normal, because they are.
I love that. Okay, now I'm really going to end the episode. So I'm going to end it how I always end it, which is follow me at Comadreando Pod on Instagram. And you can follow Sivan on Instagram at... Can you drop your handle?
It's Sivan_Hong_author. And I'm the only Sivan Hong in the world, so I'm pretty easy to find.
And if you have any questions for me or for Sivan, please make sure to send me a Comadregram via email at marcy@comadreandopod.com or slide up into my DMs. Please visit our website to read our latest blog post, to find out about future events, and to get your official Comadreando merch. And I want to thank you all for spending time with your comadres, and I want to thank Sivan for being so amazing and coming on my show. Thank you so much, and keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you for having me, Marcy. This has been so fun.
Yay. Okay.
Hello, comadre.
Hey, comadre.
Do you have a minute for comadre time? Psst. Hola, comadres. I would like to formally extend an invitation to our first Comadre Happy Hour of 2023, which will take place on Friday, January 6th from 5 to 8 p.m. at Sujo Gastro Fusion in the Bronx. Good news, there is parking available. Make sure to click the Eventbrite link in the show notes to secure your ticket. Hope to see you all there. Bye.